It was our understanding that our last big objective was to be the capture of the city of Magdeburg and then advance a few miles further to the Elbe River. This is where we were to meet the Russian troops advancing toward the river from the west. This was not the case, however. We secured the small town of Schönebeck on the east bank of the Elbe, and since the Russian troops were meeting stiff resistance and were still several miles from the river on the west side, it was decided for us that we would cross the Elbe and furnish protection for the engineers to put a pontoon bridge across. I've always had some doubt as to whether this was a good military maneuver or just an action intended to make some commander look good. We had practically no briefing as to what to expect, and what maps that were available, nobody had had time to study them to be familiar with the terrain, let alone what defenses we might encounter. We climbed on board ducks, or amphibious trucks, to make the crossing. These vehicles were similar to large, flat-bottomed boats with regular rubber tires for road travel, and as they entered the water they floated, and small propellers were engaged for power. For steering, it had a small rudder connected to the steering wheel. With 15 or 18 fully equipped men, it was slow and rode very low in the water, but we made the crossing without incident. I made the crossing as a member of I Company, 119th Infantry. I'm not sure how many troops of the 119th made the crossing, but was probably several companies. I believe I Company at this time had about 100 men. I carried a light 30 caliber machine gun M19 18A6. This was a standard 30 caliber machine gun, except that it had a lightweight air-cooled barrel, a steel shoulder rest, and small adjustable bipod legs at the muzzle end. It was capable of firing 450 to 500 rounds per minute. With me as an assistant gunner and an ammunition bearer, I carried the machine gun, a 45 caliber automatic pistol, and 250 rounds of ammunition. The assistant gunner and the ammunition bearer carried, in addition, 500 rounds each, plus their personal weapon, which could be either a 45 caliber pistol or a lightweight 30 caliber carbine. Most carried the carbine since it had more firepower and more range and accuracy. Our objective was to move inland from the river for several hundred yards into a wooded area and dig in to furnish protection from snipers and small arms for the engineers while they built a bridge across the river. We encountered some machine gun and rifle fire as we moved into the woods, but we were able to handle this, and before long we had dug in and secured our position. We were fairly safe from small arms fire as long as we stayed in our holes. We were, however, in jeopardy from cannon and mortar fire, because as these rounds of high-explosive shells landed in the tree limbs above us, they would explode and rain down shrapnel. The pontoon bridge took shape quickly, but just as the last span was about ready to be put into position, a barrage of heavy cannon fire from beyond our position rained in on the bridge, knocking it out. They would resume work on the bridge, and time and again, just as it looked like it would be completed, enemy mortar or artillery fire from a different position would knock it out. It was later discovered that the Germans had left an observer in the steeple of a church in Schönebeck, a town that we thought was secured, and he was watching the progress of the bridge and calling in the cannon and mortar fire each time just before the bridge was completed. By nightfall, the bridge still not completed, it was decided we would pull out of our positions under cover of darkness, move up the river a couple of miles, and make an attack on another small town, hoping to convince the enemy that we had made another crossing and to draw fire away from the project at Schönebeck so that the bridge might be completed. The town we were to hit must have been a mile or two inland from the river, and we moved into the outskirts of it with only light resistance. We even took some prisoners along the way. I'm not sure what really happened, whether we took them by surprise, such that we had penetrated their position before they realized we were there, or that they set a trap for us and allowed us to walk into it. At any rate, it seemed that we were being fired on from all sides. One enemy unit was just across the street from us. Just as we were getting our machine gun in operation, the German unit was doing likewise. Now, it's not too comforting to go one-on-one against their machine gun, since it has a cyclic rate of 1,150 to 1,400 rounds per minute, which was 3 times the firepower of our gun. But after a few bursts from my gun, it jammed with a bent casing that would not eject. The assistant gunner and the ammunition bearer stood their ground with carbines blazing as I tried to clear the gun with a few quick pulls on the bolt, but it would not clear. As useless as it was, I also drew the .45 caliber automatic I carried and blazed away as we drug the disabled gun and ourselves to temporary safety behind a brick building. By now it seemed the whole town was on fire from bazookas, mortars, and tracers. Also, we could see enemy tanks moving slowly down the street in our direction. They were the big Mark 6 Tiger Royals. We didn't have anything to stop them. Word came to pull back to the river any way we could. We had 2 prisoners at this time, and we told them we were withdrawing and they were free to go. One insisted on taking his chances with us rather than facing the Russians. We found a 2-story building near the river, and a few of our people had made it here already. As daylight came, we saw about 12 or 15 more of our people run out of the woods a few hundred yards from where we were. Then lumbering out of the woods behind them was an enemy tank that shot them down one by one as they tried to surrender. By now, it was light enough for airplanes, and the ever-present American P-51 fighters arrived, and the German tank headed back in the woods in concealment. Our mission now was to get back across the river any way that we could. The 4 of us, myself, my assistant gunner, my ammo bearer, and the prisoner that insisted on staying with us. Luckily, we found an old metal boat partially submerged and managed to drag it up on shore enough to dump some of the water out. We found some boards to use as paddles and started across. The boards were not very effective as paddles, and beside that, the current was swifter than we expected. We soon realized that if we didn't get to the small point of land jutting into the river on the opposite bank, that we wouldn't be able to get on shore at all, since from that point there was a high overhanging bank and the current would carry us around the bend in the river, and we would be sitting ducks for the enemy that had overlooked the river from the positions that we had dug the day before. It was at this time that we understood how much help the 4th man would be. This gave us 2 men on each side of the boat and allowed us to pull hard and steady without changing sides to keep the boat straight. We just barely managed to make the little point of land and jumped out and up the bank to safety. The 4th man in the boat, of course, was the prisoner that refused to leave us. His paddle that he rowed with strong and fast was a small shovel that most German infantrymen carried. We crossed the Elbe 2 days and nights, the 4, with about 100 men. 19 of us got back to Schöneberg. This was our last action in the war. We never knew if any more of our company survived. Sometime in the spring of 1945, just as the war was winding down, our unit moved through one of the concentration camps in the general area of central Germany. This was one of the Jewish extermination facilities and contributed to what was to be a total count of between 4 and 8 million people put to death by torture, gas chambers, and starvation. Buchenwald is a name that comes to mind, but I'm not sure if that was the name of this camp or it's just the name of one of the camps that has stayed with me over the years. This camp had been abandoned by the Germans, and surviving inmates had been moved out to other locations by the Allied forces. What was left was the smell of death, and rightly so, because a short distance from the dingy buildings was corpses of dozens of men and women stacked like cordwood, ready to be pushed into a big pit, saturated with diesel fuel or gasoline and cremated. Apparently most of these had died of starvation. Most probably did not weigh more than 70 or 80 pounds. A quick look at the quarters and cells and other facilities was enough to convince you not to tarry here, but to forever remember it as a place that must have been truly hell on earth.